Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast. We cover everything Major League, from spring training to the World Series. We've got your favorite club covered, from New York to Boston to LA. This is the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast.
Hello and welcome to another edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always, and this is episode number 197 of the Baseball Podcast. Today is Monday, June 15th. Thank you, everybody out there, for listening. I really appreciate you guys. And right off the top, I want to give a thank you to the listeners out there who commented on the show in Apple Podcasts. We got 3 new comments since Thursday's episode and about 5 new 5-star ratings. So thank you very much to everybody out there who's been listening. I know I ask you guys every time to go to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you're at, and click the 5-star button. So shout out to you individuals who did that between Thursday and Monday. But one of the reviews we got, it was titled Congratulations Mahalik, a 5-star review from Malhawk9. Kevin Mahalik did a great job addressing the social issues that are affecting not only professional sports, but our communities. It was the elephant in the room, and Mahalik nailed it. Love his show. So shout out Malhawk, who was listening last week when we discussed Black Lives Matter and everything that's going on out there right now in the world, and how we're continuing to try to progress to a better tomorrow and improve things out there for everybody. So thank you for listening to the episode. Thank you very much for the kind words. I do appreciate them. So last episode, we focused heavy on the Major League Draft, the first round specifically. Today's episode is going to be very similar, diving into the rest of each team's class, talking about the best pick, where we're going from there. But right now, here in the first segment, I do want to give an update on what's going on in the negotiations between the players and the owners, and where we're at here currently as of recording late Sunday night. But the owners sent over an additional proposal to the players late on Friday, asked them to respond by Monday, but the players wasted no time whatsoever, and they responded Saturday night. But what was included in this 72-game proposal at 80% prorated pay was a rather scathing letter from the owners to the players, basically calling them out for being extremely selfish, talking about the past agreement in March, how it was predicated on whether or not fans would be in the stands, and how they're going to need to meet them in the middle, and this is ridiculous. I'm paraphrasing here, but it eventually got to an offer, and the players rejected that very, very quickly. And then they released a statement on Saturday night that followed up this latest proposal. It was Tony Clark's statement here, so I'm going to read it for you. Quote, "Players want to play. It's who we are and what we do. Since March, the association has made it clear that our number one focus is playing the fullest season possible, as soon as possible, as safely as possible. Players agreed to billions in monetary concessions as a means to that end, and in the face of repeated media leaks and misdirection, we made additional proposals to inject new revenues into the industry, proposals that would benefit the owners, players, broadcast partners, and fans alike. It's now become apparent that these efforts have fallen upon deaf ears. In recent days, owners have decried the supposed unprofitability of owning a baseball team, and the commissioner has repeatedly threatened to schedule a dramatically shortened season unless players agree to hundreds of millions in further concessions. Our response has been consistent that such concessions are unwarranted, would be fundamentally unfair to players, and that our sport deserves the fullest 2020 season possible. These remain our positions today, particularly in light of new reports regarding MLB's national television rights. There was a $1 billion agreement with Turner Sports, informed we requested from the league weeks ago but were never provided. As a result, it unfortunately appears that further dialogue with the league would be futile. It's time to get back to work. Tell us when and where." So, end quote. a strong close there from Tony Clark, basically saying, we're not coming off the full proration. If you don't want to offer us anything above 50 games, that's fine. Just have Robert Manfred pick up the phone and tell us where we need to be in order to start the season. It's just, man, they cut off all negotiations. They said, that's it. Unless you're doing a full proration, we don't even want to hear it. Tell us when and where to show up. And a reaction to this statement, the MLB issued the following statement in response. This one read, quote, "We are disappointed that the MLBPA has chosen not to negotiate in good faith over resumption of play after MLB has made 3 successive proposals that would provide players, clubs, and our fans with an amicable resolution to the very difficult situation caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. The MLBPA understands that the agreement reached on March 26 was premised on the parties' mutual understanding that the players would be paid their full salaries only if play resumed in front of fans, and that another negotiation was to take place if clubs could not generate the billions of dollars in ticket revenue required to pay players. The MLB's position that players are entitled to virtually all the revenue from a 2020 season played without fans is not fair to the thousands of other baseball employees that clubs in our office are supporting financially during this very difficult 2020 season. We will evaluate the union's refusal to adhere to the terms of the March agreement, and after consulting with ownership, determine the best course to bring baseball back to our fans." So basically, they're very disappointed with the players. They can't believe they're not meeting them in the middle for an agreement. They state that the last agreement said full proration was based on fans in the stands, and it's not an understanding that they wouldn't renegotiate without fans. It's just, man. And then Bruce Meyer, MLBPA negotiator, responded to that statement and said, "If it is your intention to unilaterally impose a season, we again request that you inform us and our members of how many games you intend to play and when and where the players should report. It is unfair to leave players and fans hanging at this point. We demand that you inform us of your plans. Close of business Monday, May 15th. So if you're listening to this episode on the 16th or 17th, this may already be revealed. But as of right now, time of recording Sunday night, we're waiting here because basically the MLBPA said, hey, Manfred, tell us by the end of business Monday what the deal is because we can't come to an agreement. It's become apparent to us. We've been negotiating now for 6 to 8 weeks. Nothing has happened. It's not going to happen. So tell us when and where we're playing because based on the March agreement, we have acknowledged that you are able to basically say, hey, if you guys can't figure it out, here's the deal. Well, that's where we're at. Tell us when we're going to play and where we need to be. And, of course, there are tons of negatives involved with Manfred coming out and basically starting a season on his own. The deadline, I guess, for lack of a better term, obviously it's not a true deadline, but if we don't hear anything by Monday, say we'll hear it by the end of this week, by the end of June. And if you're looking at it that way, okay, you're going to need at least 2 weeks for everybody to get on quote-unquote campus, wherever the stadium is, spring training, home city, whatever it may be, 2-week quarantine to make sure they're okay as they return. Then you're going to need a 3-week spring training 2.0, which puts you basically at July 24th as the earliest possible date. But everything that we've heard from Manfred and baseball and all the rumors from everybody with the inside sources is that we're looking at August and September for the regular season. Now, there will not be regular season games after September 27th. That was one of the key dates that the owners were sticking to in these negotiations. So if you retroactive that to July 31st or August 1st, whatever date you want to pick, say it's 58 days. That's what it is from August 1st to the 27th. Well, if Manfred says, hey, we've agreed from 48 to 52 games, cut it in the middle, 50 games, well, that amount of time is 8 weeks. So you have 8 off days once a week, 6 games a week. There's your 50 games over the course of 7 to 8 weeks. And it's a frustrating outcome as well because there will be no broadcast enhancements from the players if Manfred just comes out. They won't be mic'd up. They won't be adding anything that we had in spring training. And with no fans in the stands, it certainly won't be an entertaining product. Put it on TV without the players' interactions. There will also not be any expanded postseason. Both the players and owners had proposed a 16-team playoff for the next 2 years to expand the postseason, to gather more postseason revenue, make more money for everybody involved. And since they couldn't come to an agreement, this will no longer be taking place. It will be the normal 5-team playoff on each side, one wild card, then into the round of 4, both this year and next year. After that, that's when you get into the 2021 labor negotiations. And because they weren't able to come to an agreement here in 8 weeks, it doesn't paint a bright picture for the next 18 months, because the guys I had talked to in the league had said, hey, these labor negotiations aren't going very well, and we may be headed towards a strike. This was before COVID-19 and the pandemic of this summer. And add these new negotiations on them and how poorly or horribly these went, it just it gives you an even more sour taste in your mouth for what's to come following the 2021 free agency class. So this year, this offseason, I wouldn't expect anybody to get paid, especially because they couldn't come to an agreement, so they're not about to open the pocketbook for the likes of Mookie Betts and JT Realmuto. I don't think they're going to see the area of the Bryce Harper or Garrett Cole type of money anytime soon. Go into next year where you're losing more revenue because you couldn't come to an agreement. That following free agency class is going to be affected just the same. And then you go into a possible strike and a 2022 summer without baseball once again. It's just the doomsday scenario is potentially playing out. Yes, we're going to have baseball this summer. Hopefully it is entertaining to the point where we tend to forget about this. Hopefully the rivalries and the divisions with the East, the Central, the West, it entertains to the point where we have races down the stretch, and then the playoffs are exciting, and people can try to forget that we're not having baseball right now, because spring training 2.0 was supposed to be 3 days ago. I should be talking to you guys about workouts, inter-squad games, what we're hearing out there, what's going on, and I continue to have to talk to you guys about negotiations and who's saying what, who's doing what. It's just, it's so frustrating. But that's going to wrap up the first segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. When we come back, we're going to start our Major League Baseball draft talk. We're going to wrap up each class, give a grade, talk about somebody drafted later on in the second, third, even fifth rounds that could potentially be a strong prospect for that organization. But we're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows, one of our sponsors. When we come back, we're talking Major League Baseball draft. I am your host, as always, Kevin Mahalik. I appreciate you guys listening. Hang with us.
This is your ultimate stop for everything sports. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Should I say more? From the NFL, MLB, the NBA to MMA, it's all in here. The Golden State Media Concepts Sports Podcast. Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, and this is episode number 197 of the Baseball Podcast. I appreciate you guys listening today on Monday, June 15th. Shout out to our listeners out there who put in some ratings as well as some reviews. Since Thursday's episode, we got another review from John E. Uranus. Just good stuff, 5 stars. Big fan of this podcast. Some of the best baseball talk I have found in the podcast world. Mahalik's voice is like gold for the ears. Gold for the ears. Yes, so shout out to John. I appreciate you listening and leaving 5-star review. I appreciate it. And share it with your friends. Like I said, if you haven't done so already, head to social media, head to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Follow GSMC Baseball as well as the GSMC Podcast Network. Whatever you're into, I know you're not into just baseball out there, whether it's cars, whether it's music, movies, news, politics, books, whatever it is. GSMC Podcast Network has a podcast for you. Share it with your friends as well as leave us 5 stars just like John did, and we'll give you a shout out on the show here. So now that we're into the second segment, we're talking Major League Baseball draft. We're running through the rest of the contest here because Thursday was rounds 2 through 5 after release of the podcast for everybody out there. So I want to give my final grades, kind of jump around, discuss some of the best picks potentially out of each class, discussing with some experts, some sources, doing some research online. Here are some outside of the box guys who could potentially contribute at the big league level rather quickly. But going alphabetically here from top to bottom, the Arizona Diamondbacks, they are in the B range, B+. They took Dukes, Bryce Jarvis, Miami Slade Ciccone. But one guy who could surprise is Liam Norris, a left-handed pitcher who they took in the third round. He sits 90 to 94, plus curve, plus slider. Could really surprise some people with his development here moving forward, potentially in the near future. We'll see. It depends, again, on how his body continues to develop. Next up, we got the Atlanta Braves. I'm going to give them a C. People are really just right down the middle with this draft. They had 4 picks, started well, taking Jared Schuster. But somebody who to like in this one is right-handed pitcher Bryce Elder. They took him in the 5th round. He was Texas's ace. He's got a 4-pitch mix, not really top-end stuff, more of a number 4, number 5 rotational piece, but a really high floor, not so much a high ceiling, but somebody who you could see very quickly just chewing up innings at the big league level effectively. Then you go to the Baltimore Orioles. People are mixed on this one, anywhere from a B+ to a C. I'll give them a B-. I like what they did. They shifted around their money based on number 2. Taking somebody at under slot so they could go over slot later. People like Carter Baumler in the 5th round, a right-handed pitcher. He was a TCU commit. He could be a tough sign for them, a real high upside prospect, but with the money they saved, it could be a nice investment in getting him to surpass his TCU commitment and play pro ball with offering him some more money. Next up, we got the Boston Red Sox. People have them in the C range. I'll go C+ for Boston. They gave up their 2nd-round pick for the sign-stealing scandal. They took a surprise Nick York in the 1st round. Blaze Jordan, however, in the 3rd round, a third baseman. People like this pick. He's a very well-known high school prospect. He hit a 500-foot home run at the age of 13 in a home run derby. So people have known Blaze for almost 5 years now, and people think he could advance rather quickly. And they saved money in the 1st round on York, so they could sign Jordan, get him to skip out on college and advance to the professional level. We got the Chicago Cubs next up on the list here. Let's see. Chicago, they got a B. People are on the board. Some people had them as high as A. I'll go B+. Ed Howard as their 1st-round pick. He's a prepster. High school shortstops tend to pan out. It's tough sometimes. J.P. Crawford here locally in Philadelphia gives you a little bit of a sour taste in your mouth on the high school shortstops. The next best thing when it comes to prospects, they can really miss. But Burl Caraway, a left-handed pitcher in the 2nd round, could be the quickest to pitch in the majors. He could be up even this season. It's just a massive fastball, curveball combination. Can't always locate, could come up and walk some people, but in a short season in a team like the Cubbies who needs relief help, bullpen help, he could be up as quickly as this summer making moves and helping them. So let's see here. Next up, we got the White Sox. The White Sox, they get an A. People are high on the White Sox. B+, A across the board. 2-player draft for the White Sox, but they're both really good. Lefty Garrett Crochet in the 1st round out of Tennessee. Righty Jared Kelly in the 2nd round. Kelly slipped to them in the 2nd round. Looked like a top 10 pick, but was shut down this spring due to some injury concerns. They took Jackson Miller, a catcher, in the Comp B round after the 2nd round. A catcher, really athletic, a really solid bat, really high potential. They don't know if he's going to end up behind the dish ultimately, but you take a kid who has that potential and can control the game, it's definitely a positive moving forward. Let's see here. The Cincinnati Reds, we have a C+. They used their 1st-round slot on Austin Hendrick, a prep outfielder out of Western PA. But after that, they kind of rolled the dice a little bit. Christian Roa, Bryce Bonin, catcher Jackson Miller. Jackson Miller is another one in the Comp B round, a catcher. He's athletic. He could advance quickly. It looks like Miller was Cincinnati. So Jared Kelly was the guy with the White Sox. I think I messed that one up here on the list. I apologize to the listeners out there going through my notes here. So let's see. Next up, we got Cleveland. Cleveland gets a B From myself, B+, potentially good value throughout for the Indians. Carson Tucker was a hot name leading up to the draft. Tanner Burns was one of the best, most accomplished pitchers. Logan Allen. And then a kid named Millen Tolentino, a shortstop in the 4th round. High baseball IQ, a really smooth defender who is the son of a big league player, I believe. He could really advance quickly. Really solid defense up the middle. You can't go wrong. Hopefully the bat comes around moving forward. But as well as now that it's Sunday, teams have started to be able to sign free agent draft signees for $20,000. And I was able to find a list online of signees here, so we'll run through these same teams. The Arizona Diamondbacks, they have one so far. That is public knowledge here as of Sunday night recording. That is Danny Oriente, an outfielder from Louisville, has signed with the Diamondbacks. The Atlanta Braves have made 3 signings. Landon Stevens out of Miami of Ohio. Bryson Horn, a first baseman from Columbus State. And Carter Linton, a right-hander out of Tuscaloosa. The Baltimore Orioles have 2 signees. Ryan Rotson, a right-handed pitcher from Auburn. J.D. Mundy, a first baseman from Radford. So shout out today, J.D., going professional here. The Red Sox have a handful of names released. It makes sense because, again, if you're a prospect here, the amount of money that can be offered to you is only $20,000. So you're basically aligning yourself with the organization who you think best could advance your career. And with the hire of Chaim Bloom from the Rays to the Red Sox, they're a very appealing franchise right now to be a part of. They signed Jaquito Arenado out of Tampa, a right-handed pitcher. Jordan D. Valerio out of St. Joseph's, right-handed pitcher. Graham Hoffman, a right-hander out of South Florida, loading up on the pitching. Jack McKenzie, an infielder from Fordham. Juan Montero, a catcher from Puerto Rico Baseball Academy. And Jose Garcia, catcher first baseman from FIU, Florida International. The Cubbies have a long list released here as well. Bradley Beasley, an outfielder from Cal Poly. Scott McKeon, infielder, Coastal Carolina. Scott Cabos, a left-handed pitcher out of Coastal Carolina. A couple of teammates going to the Cubbies. Graham Lawson, right-handed pitcher, South Carolina. Ben Leeper, right-handed pitcher, Oklahoma State. So these are basically college kids who have been told, you should probably sign. Yes, your scholarship may be here, but again, you may not get drafted next year as well with a short draft. So take advantage of your opportunity to head into pro ball now. Bailey Reed, a right-handed pitcher from Westmont College, and Jacob Wetzel, an outfielder from Frederick, Maryland, Junior College. As of right now, the White Sox don't have any public signings. Cincinnati has 2 of them. Francisco Uribe, second baseman out of Florida Atlantic, FAU, and James Proctor, a right-handed pitcher out of Princeton University. But that'll wrap it up for segment number 2 here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to continue to roll around the league here, go down the list, talking grades for the Major League Baseball draft. It's fun talking about which one of these kids may make a run and ultimately end up in the bigs, as well as shout out to John E. Uranus, who left us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. But let's pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows, one of our sponsors. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. Hey! The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, and this is episode number 197 of the Baseball Podcast. Today is Monday, June 15th, the deadline that the Major League Baseball Players Association has given the owners, and more specifically, Rob Manfred, to let them know when and where they need to report to play, because it's not worth negotiating anymore. We can't figure this out based on the March agreement. We said that Manfred can basically say, hey, this is what we're going to do, so tell us what it is. We can't come on the same page as the owners, and it's just going to happen. Gosh, it's so frustrating. It's even making me fumble my words here a little bit. It's just I can't put into words how frustrating it is to watch this happen for a sport that I love and played at a high level and want to see succeed and grow. There was a recent report that the average age of a baseball fan today is 57 years old, and this is bad news for baseball because it was the same publication, I believe, or a previous report was run in the year 2000 that stated that the average age was 52 years old. So the average baseball age continues to get older. This is due to restrictions on social media, due to content. Kids around there don't see baseball because it's not allowed to be shared freely, such as the other sports like basketball that are leveraging all these platforms to get to the kids and grow the game. And it's just, it's going to continue to die. And then you do stuff like this in time of a pandemic where you can be the only sport on TV. Every kid's watching. It's summer. They're home. They want to watch sports, and millionaires and billionaires are fighting and can't figure it out. It's just, man, I can't believe it. So, but diving back into the Major League Baseball draft here, starting out with the Colorado Rockies. I have them as an A B+, A-, a strong draft for the Rockies. 3 players that were in some people's top 50, Zach Veen, Drew Romo, and Chris McMahon. Chris McMahon is the pick who experts like at the end of the second round. He was the ace for Miami down in Florida. He touches 98. He could be a little bit all over the place, which is why he fell into the second round, as well as signability concerns. But people expect the Rockies to be able to make that move and get him on the roster. Let's see. The Detroit Tigers had a strong draft as well. We have them as an A B+, A-. Number 1, Spencer Torkelson, future middle of the lineup anchor, whether he's first base, outfielder, third base like they announced him. Who knows? We'll have to wait and see about that. Dylan Dingler is a strong name, and we're going to talk about names more later in the show here. That's how we're going to wrap up the show, talking about some of the best names in the draft moving forward. But Colt Keith, a third baseman in the 5th round. He was an Arizona State commit. He's going to take a chance probably with the Tigers here. They're going to be able to compensate him, get him out of that commit to Arizona State. It should be a strong implication for how they feel about him ultimately at third base. With them being a few years away from contention, for him, the window is 3 to 5 years from now, so you can take that leap of faith, go to professional baseball, and know that when you're ready is probably the next time that the Tigers are going to be competitive, and that's definitely a bonus when you look at the timeline of the big league club as well as your developmental timeline, and aligning for postseason success is every prospect's dream. So the Houston Astros are next. They're a solid C, C-, nothing spectacular. Obviously, they didn't have much to work with. They surrendered their 1st and 2nd round picks as part of the sign stealing scandal from a few years ago. So they went all the way into the 3rd at 72. Overall, I believe that, let's see here, they took Alex Santos. People think he is the best pick of their class. The experts, right-handed pitcher, 3+ pitches. He's just going to take time to develop, which is fine for the Astros because their big league club is ready to compete. So they're looking to add talent to that next wave, hopefully moving forward. After some of the guys who retire, Verlander getting up there, Greinke will be moving on. They'll be looking for guys to fill in the void coming up in 2 to 3 years down the road. The Kansas City Royals had a strong draft, A-, very strong. Asa Lacy, the top pitcher in the draft class, slipped out of the top 3 right there at number 4. That's a big win. Then you add Nick Lofton, who is the best pick, apparently value for the draft, according to the experts. Took him at the end of round 1, a shortstop. He could play many different positions. Second base, outfield. They took Ben Hernandez. high school pitcher, an excellent changeup. Tyler Gentry was a nice third-round pickup for the Royals as well. A well-run ball club for the Royals. I know they don't pay their top-end talent a lot of times, so it's difficult for them to maintain some of these competitive runs such as they had a few years ago. But ultimately, if they continue to draft like this, they will be back sooner than later and should be here to stay. So the LA Angels, let's give them a B, B plus if we're being generous here. Reed Detmers, the lefty out of Louisville, arguably the most MLB-ready pitcher in the draft. He could be on the 50-man roster as early as this season. He could potentially be on that taxi squad everybody's talking about, utilizing moving forward. Let's see, David Calibres, high-end tools as a possible tough sign, however, third-round pick for them. People like that pick. The expert like that pick. He's an Arkansas commit, a speedster. That's where it could be tough to get him out of that commitment to Arkansas, but they're hoping if they overpay for him, hopefully potentially letting go of somebody later in the draft, but he could be worth it going over slot in this particular case. We have the LA Dodgers as a B. B plus potentially. I like what the Dodgers did. Bobby Miller, let's see, Clayton Beeter, as well as Landon Knack. That's a heck of a name there, Knack. But Clayton Beeter, a right-handed pitcher in the second round, he's had Tommy John surgery already, but has the best curveball in the class. So depending on how you feel about Tommy John surgery now in 2020, a lot of people see it as an inevitability for a lot of these kids, a lot of these arms. The Phils took a high school kid. It's probably going to happen to him. So the fact that Beeter has already had Tommy John could potentially be looked at as a good thing. Get it out of the way. We know it's going to happen. Let's do it before we get him into our system. Possibly look at 2020 as a bit of a redshirt year and then utilize him moving forward. The Miami Marlins, they get an A-. They had a really strong class. They had a surprise at number 3, Max Meyer, but he's big league ready. He could be up in the bullpen as soon as the next year or the year after that. And a lot of Miami's talent at the next wave of their competitiveness is at the high levels of their minor league system. Their AA team, AAA team are loaded with a lot of their top prospects. So them at the top of the draft, they were not looking for a guy who was potentially 5 years away. They were looking for somebody to help them in a year or two, and Max Meyer is that guy for sure. They took 3 other arms, Dax Fulton, Kyle Nicholas, and Zach McCambly, as well as the top of the draft. Dax Fulton, a left-hander in the second round, best high school lefty on the board. He's another gentleman who's had Tommy John surgery already, so he won't be ready next year. But again, could come back stronger, rehabbing, working other ligaments, elements of the body to improve yourself. When you come back, it's one of those things, maybe get it out of the way. Maybe it's a blessing in disguise for them moving forward. But looking at the free agent signing so far for this group of teams, the Rockies do not have anybody available right now. The Tigers have nobody public. The Astros have made a couple of different signings. Jimmy Endersby, a right-handed pitcher, a high school kid out of Concordia, California. Justin Dearden, an outfielder out of Southeast Missouri, is a signing for them. Cesar Gomez, right-handed pitcher out of UT Arlington. Peter Zimmerman, an infielder out of Missouri. So they've signed 4 guys so far to the public's knowledge. The Kansas City Royals have not made any signings. The LA Angels have not made any signings. The LA Dodgers only have 1, which is surprising to me because if I'm a kid who has my pick of organizations to go to, organizations to play for, the Dodgers are a well-run organization. Yes, they sign a lot of top-end prospects, bring in top-end talent, but they also develop talent internally. Clayton Kershaw, Walker Buehler, other guys on the mound have developed internally for the Dodgers. So to see only 1 guy, Robbie Pito, a right-handed pitcher from Stetson University, surprises me. I would think even some high school kids would want to take some chances and get themselves involved with an organization like the Dodgers. And the Miami Marlins signed a local kid. They only have 1 public available now, Antonio Velez, a left-handed pitcher out of Florida State, wants to stay down in Florida, take a shot with the local Miami Marlins. But a strong group here, this second group, as we continue to work our way through here. A couple of different A's in the group. The Marlins got an A, the Royals got an A, and the Rockies and Tigers all strong. So a solid job by these group of teams picking in the Major League Baseball draft. But that'll wrap it up for the third segment here of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. we're continuing to travel around the Major League Baseball teams. We're halfway through our Major League Baseball draft recap and coverage for today's episode. I appreciate everybody listening in. If you haven't done so yet, head to social media, follow us, head to Apple Podcasts. Shout out to the latest gentleman. We've read 2 reviews so far on today's episode. We got 1 more to go. We got 3 reviews since Thursday's episode. That's fantastic from everybody listening out there. If you can, take 30 seconds, click on write a review. If you scroll all the way down, it'll ask for 5 stars, a title, and a description. Takes about 2 minutes. It helps us out a ton here in the podcast network as we continue to try to spread the word. But we'll pause right now for a word from one of our sponsors, one of our sister shows. When we come back, we'll continue around the league talking Major League Baseball draft. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is the GSMC Baseball Podcast.
Want to know the latest in soccer? Then listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast. From MLS, the World Cup, and the Premier League, we've got you covered. The latest updates, the hottest matches, and news on the league's top players. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Soccer Podcast.
David Beckham scores the goal to take England all the way to the World Cup finals.
Listen now.
Welcome back to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Kevin Mahalik, and today is episode number 197 of the Baseball Podcast on Monday, June 15th. Another lovely Monday out there. Hopefully everybody's starting their work week off right. Everybody got their coffee going, their breakfast made. They're on the right foot, so to speak, for this week, and everything's feeling good. So we're continuing to get back out there, continuing to do social distancing. Everybody out there who's been protesting, continue to stay safe, continue to try to take measures, safety measures, health measures as much as possible. Obviously, I commend what you're fighting for and everything you're doing out there to continue to drive change, as this, once again, cannot be a once-and-done thing. We have to continue to move forward, continue to discuss about it, talk about it, realize what we can do, and continue to protest and drive change and vote this year as well. I'm hearing a lot of times that voting is something that we can do to be very much involved, not only for the presidential election, but also local officials. This can go a long way in helping for reform and changes to the justice system or the judicial system, whatever needs to be reformed moving forward. If we get out there and get involved in our local elections, get involved with our local politicians, this could help continue to change things and drive positive energy moving forward as we get off of COVID-19, continue to move forward of COVID-19, maybe not get off of it. I know things have started to slow down out there, but we are seeing spikes in certain parts of the country. So if you're listening from those parts of the country, hopefully you're staying safe. Everybody out there, obviously there's a lot of craziness happening here in the middle of June 2020. But I want to give one more shout out. We got a 3rd review written on Apple Podcasts. Shout out to Phone69, 5-star review, good stuff. He said, good stuff, full of great content, doesn't pander to listeners. You can definitely tell that Kevin was a baseball guy. Always nice to hear a perspective from a guy who actually laced them up. Will be a regular listener consistently. Kudos. Keep up the good work. So I don't know who you are, Phone69. Unlike John or Malhawk earlier, we don't really get anything out of that, but I appreciate the 5-star review. I appreciate you listening. You said you'd be listening consistently, so I appreciate it. Here's your little shout-out. And if that's not you out there and you want to get a shout-out yourself on the show, if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, just scroll down, hit the write a review button, leave 5 stars, write something there. I'll read it on the show. We'll make this more of a community as we continue to expand the podcast moving forward. As numbers continue to increase, you guys continue to help us out by telling your friends about the podcast. We can continue to have a lot of fun here. But Diving back into the Major League Baseball draft, going to Milwaukee, or Milwaukee. I like to say ever since watching Wayne's World when I was like 10 years old, every time I see this now, it's always Milwaukee. Well, they get themselves an AA- too. A lot of people are high on their draft. They basically took what was given to them. They took Garrett Mitchell in the first round out of UCLA, Miami shortstop Freddie Zamora later in the draft as well. Xavier Warren, a catcher who they took. Xavier Warren, the catcher in the third round. The experts are high on. He's a switch hitter who could end up playing multiple positions. They don't know if he'll end up behind the dish for the rest of his career, but still a top prospect for that moving forward. The Minnesota Twins, a lot of people not as high on them. I'll give them a C+, B-. They emphasize college hitters with big track records in recent years. First rounder Aaron Sabato out of UNC. They took Alaric Soler. Good bat to ball skills. They can pretty much hit, but who knows if they can play defense. Let's see here. People like their pick of Kalea Rosario, an outfielder from Hawaii in the 5th round. He has a corner outfield potential with pop. He won a home run derby contest at a local, I don't know what it's called. Showcase is probably the word I'm looking for. It was one of those shrine games type of thing. He won the derby, put himself on the map, ultimately goes in the 5th round to the Twins. The New York Mets, they get high grades. They got a B+, A-, depending on who you're talking to. Basically, it comes down to 3 players, Pete Crow, Armstrong, high school outfielder, a potential leadoff hitter moving forward, right-hander JT Ginn, possible top 10 pick, but he blew out his elbow this spring. The experts really like that pick. He's having Tommy John surgery, but before that, he was up to 97. So, like we talked about just in the last segment, I believe this is now the 3rd time we're talking about either a younger college kid or a high school kid throwing mid to high 90s where the body gives out, the Tommy John elbow pops. You have the surgery, you come back stronger, the ligament itself stronger, you're throwing a little bit harder, and it's a blessing in disguise that you got it out of the way and you missed time early as opposed to doing it or AA or AAA. So it's a fascinating conversation, but the Mets take a chance on him. And then as well as outfielder Isaiah Green, an outfielder with power potential for the Mets. But next up, we got the Yankees. They're right in the middle as well. B-, C+. They forfeited their 2nd and 5th round picks to sign Garrett Cole. So they were really limited in their assets, only 3 picks. They took Austin Wells in the 1st round with the 28th pick. He's a catcher, ultimately may not stay there. They took him out of high school. He went to college, upped his status. They took him again in the 1st round, so obviously they really liked him. Trevor Haver in the 3rd round has a chance to carve out a very nice career as a super utility player. The experts really like him in the 3rd round, drafted as a second baseman, best utility defender in the draft. Some experts labeled him coming out, so the Yankees basically wanting to improve their defense, get Garrett Cole, some emphasis behind him. Hey, get ground balls. We're going to get outs for you. This is the way we're going to keep it moving, rolling forward. So next up, we got the Oakland A's. They're right in the middle, B+. They took prep catcher Tyler Soderstrom in the 1st round, going to have to overpay him for slot, which could end up affecting a few of their picks. But 2nd round, right-handed pitcher Jeff Criswell, another solid yet unspectacular. Really depends on Soderstrom, what he does. If he goes over slot, people like Criswell in the 2nd round. He's got a good 3-pitch mix, so it's probably only going to be the 2 of them making the move to the professional ranks and potentially getting involved with the Athletics moving forward. The Philadelphia Phillies, let's go Phils. People like him right in the B range. B+ is what I'll go because I'll homer it for the B+ there, the extra bit. The right-handed prep pitcher Mick Abel, they like him in the middle of the 1st round. He fell to them. They think he has the makings of being a number 1 or a number 2. Even if he is a number 2, you'll take those all day. In the 3rd round, they took shortstop Casey Martin. He had 1st round tools and was a potential 1st round pick after his freshman year, but he slipped this year due to concerns with pitch recognition, high strikeout rates. People, they like the power and the pop and the bat and the tools, but he had a ton of strikeouts. The average was down this year. He was just starting to get hot right before they shut things down, so potentially if they went another month or 2, he wouldn't have been available in the 3rd round. So Casey Martin has the potential to swing this draft for the Phillies as being a steal in the 3rd round as a 1st round talent. The Pittsburgh Pirates draft B+, A-, doing really well. They took Nick Gonzalez, 2nd baseman, potential shortstop, power guy, outfielder. They really like him after Gonzalez. They took athletic arms, Carmen Majinski, Jared Jones, Nick Garcia. Let's see here. Gonzalez, Majinski, and Jones were all in the top 50 from this scouting site. People like Nick Garcia in the third round, righty. He's a D3 arm, so a D3 prospect. Not a lot of Division III kids get drafted, but he was up to 97. It's just a matter of if he can find the zone consistently and if he's going to be effective enough to be ultimately a reliever at the next level. The San Diego Padres, they get a B+, a B from everybody out here. They're not so bad. Oh, let's see here. San Diego. Yeah, okay, we're good. San Diego Padres, they get a B. They're enamored with Robert Hassel, the outfielder. Doesn't come as a shock that they took him at number 8. Then they took Justin Lang, a big arm project. Outfielder Owen Cassie has raw power. Right-handed Cole Wilcox. Cole Wilcox in the third round. He's got an electric arm, stands 6'5". So they went heavy on high-end prospects, low floor, high ceiling prospects, really hit or miss for them, depending on where you're looking at it. But I'm okay with that with San Diego. So as you're trying to get to that next level, you're going to have to take some swings sometimes, and every now and then you're going to miss. But looking at free agent signings, the Brewers, TJ Shook, right-handed pitcher at South Carolina. Nobody for the Twins, nobody for the Mets. Once again, these guys could start signing here Sunday as of, I think, 5 p.m. Recording this late Sunday evening. Names are just starting to roll out here, so these are TBD. But the Yankees have signed Carson Coleman, right-handed pitcher from Kentucky. Trevor Holloway, right-handed pitcher from Central Florida. Jared Lesser, a right-handed pitcher from BYU. So the Yankees loading up on the pitching side of things. The Athletics took William Simonet, an infielder from Wake Forest. The Phillies have made 3 moves. Jake McKenna, a lefty out of Ocean City High School, New Jersey. That's a local kid, only an hour and a half here from Philly. Jordan Fowler, a left-handed pitcher from Central Missouri. And Sam Jacobzak, a right-handed pitcher from Northeastern. So pitching prospects for the Phillies as well. The Pirates did not make any moves. And then we have the San Diego Padres who, a lot of people signing in San Diego. Very interesting. I don't know why they're ahead of the game here, but 6 signees. Danny Dens, left-handed pitcher from Memphis. Carter Lowen, a right-handed pitcher out of Hawaii. Zach Mathis, an infielder from LSU. Michael Green, an outfielder from Clemson. Chase Walter, a right-handed pitcher from Western Carolina, and Sam Ruda, a shortstop out of high school out of Pennsylvania. So, kid from high school in PA going out to San Diego. I dig that. Shout out to that kid going across country to pursue his dreams there. But that'll wrap it up for the 4th segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. We're going to pause right now for a word from one of our sister shows, one of our sponsors, but when we come back, we're going to wrap up our draft talk about the last 7 teams or so, given our finalized grades here. I appreciate everybody listening out there. We'll be right back.
Are you looking to get your college football fix? Looking to get the latest news on your favorite school's team? The GSMC College Football Podcast is your ticket to all things college football. Join us as we talk college football from the national championship, the college rivalries, the bowl game, to the Heisman Trophy. To which conference is the best? We've got you covered for the Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, the Pac-12, ACC, and everything in between. Download the GSMC College Football Podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back, and thanks for listening to the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. This is episode number 197 of the Baseball Podcast, and we're continuing to roll through the Major League Baseball draft. We're continuing to run through alphabetically. We've made it all the way to the San Francisco Giants, who actually had themselves a nice draft. There's mixed results when you look across the experts. I've seen grades as low as a C for the Giants and grades as high as an A for the Giants. So if you're locally listening out there in San Francisco, you're probably thinking the Giants had a good draft, but some people across the country have mixed reviews on essentially what happened. But they had 5 picks in the top 100. They used 4 of them on college kids, starting out with catcher Patrick Bailey. And this really can throw the draft one way or the other because they already have Joey Bart in the system behind the dish. You take another catcher at the high level. However, people are discussing the 2-catcher, 1 designated hitter situation because the universal DH looks to become a thing sooner than later, will be implemented. So by the time Bailey's up in the bigs, he could DH. You switch off, you save the knees, and you save both guys moving forward. So it's an interesting way to look at things. Not a lot of teams go in that direction, but certainly the Giants trying to be at the forefront of the next movement. They also took third baseman Casey Schmidt, potential 3-pitch lefty Nick Sweeney, and then infielder Jimmy Glenecki as well in the draft. And people like Kyle Harrison as well for them, a left-handed pitcher in the 3rd round. He's polished and deceptive. He just doesn't have overpowering stuff. So it's going to be a matter of if his deception, off-speed, changing locations, the 4 quadrants, in, out, up, down, if he'll be able to make things stay here as he continues to climb in the minor league levels moving forward. Next up, we got the Seattle Mariners. The Mariners had themselves a nice draft, B+, A-. Georgia righty Emerson Hancock was viewed as a potential number 1 coming into the spring, a top 5 pick at least. So to get him in number 6 was a nice pick for the Mariners moving forward. Best case scenario, they also took outfielder Zach DeLoach in the 2nd round. Right-handed pitcher Connor Phillips in the competitive round. Those are good values. Phillips was viewed as somebody who has potential untapped potential. Again, a quick arm action. It really gets on you mid-90s. They're worried about injuries with him moving forward, if he'll be able to sustain what's happening with that arm action that he has. It's really deceptive, really quick. Almost Max Scherzer-like, but again, it's very violent, so who knows if he'll be able to maintain it. But the St. Louis Cardinals are a very well-run organization. They find themselves in the B+, A- field as always. They use their first 3 picks to swing from their heels. They really took high-end guys with potential as well as low floors, but I like that, so I'm down with the Cardinals. They took a prep third baseman, Jordan Walker, a really big kid with huge power potential. They took a prep shortstop, Mason Wynn, a dynamic athlete with really good bat speed, and a prep right-hander, Tink Hentz, a smaller pitcher with a fast arm, high spin rate. So if you're into analytics, yeah, this is one of your guys. So really went with the high school kids. That's high level. Who knows? Will they pan out? Will they not? Mason Wynn in the 2nd round. He was announced as a potential 2-way audition guy for them as well. They announced him as shortstop / right-handed pitcher. He was in one of these elite showcase, whether it was Perfect Game or one of the other organization that does this. But he pitched a scoreless inning, then he also hit and he homered in the same game. So he was on the mound dealing 95 and then got his bat, went into the box and hit one out. So very impressive stuff from Mason Wynn. And we'll be able to see if he's like the gentleman at Louisville who's doing it for the Rays, can go both ways and hit and pitch as the rosters continue to expand. It could be more of a reality moving forward. But next up, we got the Rays. Oh, man, these guys are just a well-oiled machine. B+, A-. They just focused on upside. They had an extra pick and extra money. They landed Nick Bitsko in the 1st round, who reclassified into this year's class. Would have been a top 5 pick next year if he'd been around. And Bitsko going to the Rays, just lock in his Hall of Fame future. That's the perfect organization for a kid like him. Young kid, mid to high 90s, high spin rates, maybe doesn't know how to pitch effectively yet. Get him into that type of program, and he should have no problem finding success at the big league level. It's just, man, I'm rooting for him too. They took Alika Williams in the competitive balance round A. He's a good up-the-middle athlete. 3rd round pick, Hunter Barnhart's a 2-sport guy with a live arm. The experts like him, a right-handed pitcher. He was an Arizona State commit, but 2-sport athlete. He was the quarterback for the team as well, a very successful football program there in high school. So they do believe they'll be able to get him out of that Arizona State commitment and get into professional ball. But nice to see athletes, two-sport guys, be able to get into an organization like the Rays where, again, they seem to get the most out of their players and really use the top-end talent that they develop. But the lowest grade we've seen so far, that I've seen so far at multiple outlets, the Rangers anywhere from a D to a C. Clearly the bottom of the barrel. Everybody else, C, B, you could talk about it, but the Rangers just came in with a D. They said a knack for getting off the beaten path. First rounder Nick Foscue can really hit, but he was a half a round earlier than expected. Second rounder Evan Carter, high school outfielder from Tennessee, wasn't even in Baseball America's top 500, and they took him in the second round, so that's a surprise pick. Third round pick, Dakoa Robbie, has an interesting arm, but again, maybe a little bit of a reach there. He's certainly a strike thrower, but really doesn't jump off the page analytically in regards to anything that he has to do. So quite a few question marks from the Texas Rangers when it came to this draft, from multiple scouts and multiple experts out there in just confusion. But the Toronto Blue Jays, they find themselves at the top of the grades. They get an A. Austin Martin was the number 1 overall prospect, according to some publications, heading into this year's draft. So finding him sliding all the way down to number 5, even if they didn't have him on number 1 on their board, he was certainly the highest rated prospect still available. Pair him with some of the other guys. It's going to be fun to watch. Let's see. They used their remaining picks on a few different guys. A fringe first round arm, second round pick CJ Van Eck. He was a riser with spin rates analytically. Teams love that. Fourth rounder Nick Frasso could have been a second rounder, but he got hurt prior to everything shutting down this year. So potential upside picks after a nice pick at the top of the draft. Again, Nick Faso, he has huge upside in the fourth round, 6'5", a big kid. People really like how he could potentially pan out moving forward. And then lastly here, the Washington Nationals, again, alphabetical order. They had a solid draft. People have them right in the middle, B, B-, one of those particular drafts. Nothing crazy. Very, very solid. Big league contributors from this draft, but maybe no high-end all-stars. Oklahoma's Cade Cavelli coming off the board. LSU's Cole Henry. UCLA's Holden Powell. So they went college, right-handed pitching, trying to get rotation, trying to backfill some potential arms as they get older. Cavelli and Henry could pitch in the middle of the rotation. Again, being a number 2 and number 3. That's why people really have a B when it comes to this class, because there isn't that ace-like potential. There isn't that MVP all-star potential from the Nationals. But if you have a draft class where you get a number 3 and a number 4 starter, nobody's going to be arguing with that class moving forward. But just an overall recap of the Major League Draft. A ton of A's, a ton of B pluses. Again, with only 5 rounds and the amount of prospects, the opportunity to have a positive draft is much higher than that of football, because you do get contributions from third, fourth round picks, but they're not looking to play right away and plug and play like in the NFL. So a lot of this will be TBD for a handful of years. Once again, the Texas Rangers were the only people that jumped out as a D or a C-. Everybody else was B, B+, A- across the board everywhere. So we'll just have to wait and see how those ultimately pan out for everybody. But the draft itself put together, it was well done on ESPN, took place over the course of 2 days, Wednesday and Thursday. They had the Zoom-like images from the living rooms of the kids. I thought that was a positive. It was kind of interesting having the draft at a time where they don't have an agreement. Really, this should have been happening during spring training in the background, but it wasn't. So Manfred had to come out and give an interview beforehand and talk about how, yes, 100% we're going to have baseball, and try to lighten the mood and basically put the blame on the players, and it's not his fault or the owner's fault. And then you went into the draft and you couldn't help but be uplifted because you were watching these kids' dreams be realized. You were watching the delay on television. They get the call. They go nuts in the living room. What are they wearing? Blazers. People are wearing sunglasses inside. People are all dressed up for the gram. It was just very entertaining and fun to watch. I think they utilized a lot of the National Football League kind of style for the draft that they saw to be successful. Some of the interviews for the kids were a lot of fun. They were just excited because, again, these are high school kids getting interviewed, unlike the NFL where they're at least 3 years into college, so they're all 21 years old. Some of these kids, 17, 18 years old, getting on ESPN, getting on MLB Network is the highlight of their life thus far, as well as getting drafted. So they don't know what to say. They're giddy. They're smiling. They're trying to be professional, not make fools of themselves, and it's just fun to watch. But hopefully you enjoyed what your team did out there over the course of the draft. It does set the future moving forward. Only 5 rounds. Very difficult to predict what's going on. Oh, that's right. Free agent signees for these last guys. The Giants signed Carter Williams out of North Carolina Central. The Mariners signed Brett Rodriguez and Justin Levy out of Wofford and Louisville. Let's see here. The Cardinals were busy. Matt Chamberlain, outfielder out of New Haven. Gianluca Delatry, right-handed pitcher out of North Carolina. Mac Lardner, left-handed pitcher out of Gonzales. Omar Sanchez, a left-handed pitcher. It looks like a foreign gentleman. Matt Kopernick, third baseman outfielder, high school kid out of Connecticut. The Rays don't have anybody available yet. The Rangers signed Fernando Amaro, a catcher from Puerto Rico. Connor Seckler, a right-handed pitcher from Missouri. The Toronto Blue Jays signed Harrison Ray, second baseman out of Vanderbilt. And the Washington Nationals signed Gio Diaz, an infielder out of St. Mary's. But that'll wrap it up here for our 5th segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. As always, I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. Thank you again for listening. We're going to come back on this next side talking about the best names in this year's Major League Baseball draft. It's we like to have fun wrapping up the show, so stick around. We'll be right back.
Are you looking for the very best NFL and college football podcast? Then check out the GSMC Football Podcast. Get the latest football news both on and off the field. From the NFL Draft to trades to the rumor mill to the NFL Combines, they got you covered. That's GSMCpodcast.com/football-podcast. Get updates on college rivalries, game day insights, and much, much more. It's football talk the way you want it. This show eats, sleeps, and breathes football. Don't forget to like them on Facebook and follow them on Twitter. Visit GSMCpodcast.com for more info.
Welcome back to the 6th and final segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik, as always. This is episode number 197 of the Baseball Podcast. Today is Monday, June 15th. Happy Monday to everybody out there as we get off to another work week. I was hoping to have an agreement to discuss with you guys in today's episode between the players and the owners, but that is certainly not going to take place, as we talked about on the top of today's episode. By Thursday's episode, our next episode here at the Baseball Podcast, we should have heard from Robert Manfred. The players gave a soft deadline of Monday today. As of time of recording, late Sunday evening, we haven't heard from Mr. Manfred, so I'm hoping by Thursday's episode we'll have something to talk about in terms of what ultimately he decided, as well as I'm going to discuss with you guys the Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire documentary that's taken place on ESPN right now, or just moments ago here on Sunday night. I know with the draft and the latest in negotiations and updates going on, I wanted to talk about that on today's episode, so I figured I'd save Slammin' Sammy and Mark McGwire until Thursday's episode and talk about the summer of '98 and ultimately what our thoughts are on the documentary. So if you watch the documentary and you want to give me your thoughts, head into the comments just like those 3 gentlemen did today, or ladies. I don't want to discriminate. Johnny Uranus, Malhawk9, and Phone69 all left 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. I very much appreciate you guys out there. I don't believe those are biological names as their IDs, but I appreciate it, and I'm going to read them on the show here. It helps us moving forward. It helps us spread the word. We also had 5 new 5-star ratings come in. They didn't write a review, but they left a rating, so feel free to do that yourself. I very much appreciate it, so I can continue to talk with you guys here, having fun, discussing all things Major League Baseball. If you haven't done so yet, head to social media, like, follow, subscribe on everything, YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, across the board. As well as when you're getting done listening here to this final segment, text this episode to one of your friends. I know everybody out there listening is a baseball fan. You know somebody out there who's a baseball fan. Shoot them this episode and say, hey, check this out. This kid's pretty good. We should share it, so hopefully we continue to grow here and continue to be part of a community moving forward, as I very much appreciate everything you guys are doing out there. But if you've been listening to the show for a little bit now, you guys know the drill here in the 6th and final segment. If this is your first time, well, we like to have a little bit of fun. We like to go off the board a little bit, kind of take it less serious here on the tail end of the episode, come up with either a game or suggestions, anything to, basically Major League Baseball related. But I wanted to talk to you guys today about the best names in the Major League Baseball draft. Every year there's some quality names. One, because either they're hilarious, or two, it just sounds like a baseball guy. It just sounds like a baseball name. I know some of you out there, I myself being the millennial, 31 years old, starting to get into the age where we're having kids, you're definitely thinking about, if it's going to be a boy, how's that name going to sound on the ball field? What's the nickname going to be? If he's a football guy, what are they going to call him? What about if he's a baseball guy? So you're certainly thinking of that hum babe, hum skip, what are you going to call him type of conversation. So when you get a kid named Hudson Haskin, that's a solid Southern baseball name. I don't even know if Hudson's from the South, but typically that's where I've seen that name. Hudson Haskin, an excellent baseball name. You get the back-to-back syllables there. Jared Jones, another one, just very solid. Oh, man, this kid probably hits well. He comes up. Let's see here. Luke Little, a third one. Again, the bang-bangs there, they tend to roll well in the baseball world. Then you get like a Takoa Robbie. Takoa, I like that first name. He's probably going to go like an Ichiro, go with Takoa. We got Bick Way, it looks like. That's a solid name. Jagger Haynes. Oh, man, shout out to Jagger. I'm down with that one there. C.J. Van Eyck, I believe, is one. Van Eyck is a solid name here. If he gets hot at the big league level, that could be a good one. Addison Coffee. How do you like your coffee? Addison Coffee. That's a solid name for Addison as well. But some of the top ones on the list here, if I could go down them. Baron Radcliffe, a pick from the Phillies. I like that one. I don't know. Radcliffe. It just sounds like he's a law firm or something like that moving forward. Well, let's see. We got Alaric Soler. Sounds like you're playing solitaire with Soler on the bus ride. Yo, me and Soli are on the back of the bus rolling here in the minor league system. It's just Alaric Soler. So that's a solid name. Then you got Blaze Jordan. So the Blaze were a team in my youth. I was on the Texas Mad Cats. It was a travel team. We went all over the country. We won national championships. We had 2 big leaguers on our team, 7 Division I players, 2 NFL guys, 4 more college football players. We were absolutely stacked at the age of 12 to 13, going to Omaha, Cooperstown, Steamboat Springs, Florida, all over the place. And it's just our Blaze were our top competition locally outside of Dallas, Texas. They would always show up in all the tournaments we were in. We would always end up running into them, and we would always end up beating them. So every time I see the name Blaze, I always go back to my adolescent days playing against the Blaze and how we would always have fun just kicking the crap out of them. So that was fun. But Petey Halpin out of the Indians. He sounds like a 5th grader who never graduated elementary school. Hey, Mr. Halpin, what are we doing here, Petey? Come on now. It's just like, man, oh, God. But some of the names I've read before, Emerson Hancock, that's a good one. It sounds like somebody who was working in radio at the local university there. Emerson Hancock, DJ Hancock. So, again, we're having fun here in the 6th segment of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. But Cade Cavalli, I just like Cavalli. Cavalli with the Nationals. What do you think? Cavalli, Cade Cavalli. He's a strong kid. But Jimmy Glowacki, I can't even pronounce that one. I'm butchering that one. He went to the Giants. Who the heck knows? But Tink Hentz. Ooh, I like Tink. Man, that one's going to be, if he ends up coming up to the show and performing extremely well, Tink is going to be hard to hear on ESPN day in and day out, that's for sure. So, Burl Carraway, number 51 to the Cubs. I like the name Burl. Oh, man, Pat Burl is what he thinks about. I've never seen Burl as a first name. So, let's see. Spencer Torkelson. You got to like Torkelson. You got to love that he went number 1 overall. You got to love that he's going to be fast-tracked to the bigs. We're going to see him in some home run derbies in the future. I guarantee you that much, like a Pete Alonso-esque. So, Torkelson, I'm down with very much. Daxton Fulton. I like that one. That sounds like a football player almost. So you get Daxton Fulton playing for the Marlins. Man, it just sounds like somebody who's going to come out of nowhere from the safety position and lay a hitting on you. But Daxton, let's see how he does in Miami. Dylan Dingler, that's a top one there for the Tigers. Man, the Tigers have 2 of the top names in Torkelson and Dingler. So their scouts were pretty much just looking at who's got the best name. Let's take them in the first 2 rounds. Who cares how they play? It's just, let's take Dingler and Torkelson. We'll put it on a shirt. 2024, running for president. I almost said Stingler. Torkelson and Dingler. Oh, man. But the name that's tough to beat this year was Clayton Beater. People like Beater. It sounds like a used car salesman. Clayton Beater for the L.A. Dodgers. But, oh, gosh, that's fun. And there's definitely some names out there I missed. I tried to go through the list, come up with some good ones. Some year there's some that are better than others. But ultimately the draft is a lot of fun because you're always watching ESPN and you're going, wait a minute, who was that? Who did they just pick? They took Addison Coffey? They took R.J. Dabovich. So, yeah, you kind of do a double take there. But, oh, man, that'll pretty much wrap it up for today's episode of the GSMC Baseball Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I do want to close today by giving a shout-out to all the essential workers out there. As economies continue to open, more and more people are getting back to work. But I don't want to forget all the hard work that's being done by the doctors, nurses, firefighters, policemen. Yes, I know everything's going on, but they're still keeping us safe for the majority of America out there. At least that's my assumption. Again, maybe I'm wrong there. But shout out to all the essential workers, everybody at the local gas stations, local pharmacies, continuing to get back out there, local plumbers, local contractors, everybody like that, continuing to try to get everybody moving forward here. So hopefully you enjoyed another beautiful weekend this past weekend. I know it was here in the greater Philadelphia area. Like I said, Monday heading into another week, we should have another episode, a great episode lined up for you Thursday. We'll have the update from Robert Manfred and everything that's going on with regards to the new season. Hopefully we'll have specific dates to finally talk about and discuss moving forward, as well as we'll talk about Sammy Sosa, Mark McGwire, the ESPN documentary in that 1998 summer. And what I remember from being 9 years old, I'm sure is different from what you remember out there. So let me know in the comments section. Head to iTunes, like, subscribe, rate, review. Once again, final shout out to the 3 individuals who left reviews, the 5 individuals who left ratings. If you haven't done that yet, please do so. Head to social media, like, subscribe, rate, review the podcast on there as well. As we continue to grow, we continue to move forward. I very much appreciate everything you guys are doing out there for me. But that'll wrap it up for this edition of the GSMC Baseball Podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Mahalik. As always, have a great night, everyone.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Baseball Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. From movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.